What I think was the most significant thing? That the FIA decided not to do a standing start, to be honest. I
Oh,
think, we had that delay, which I think was unnecessary. And then we didn't even get a standing start out of it. I think that was pathetic. And we should have had a standing start. I think he's got a lot of talent. There's no doubt
he's
about
brilliant.
it. He's a very, very good racing driver. But he's got this incredibly difficult guy to beat. And I think anyone would find it. I think even Max, if he was at McLaren, would find it. He'd find Oscar would be the guy that would be giving him more attention probably than any other driver on the grid. What is it that Christian's going to bring? Because it's not just Christian. What can he do? All he is just a guy that's going to say, "Oh, good luck, Lewis. Good luck, Charles, and engineers. Everybody happy? Anybody need a cup of tea, or whatever? Or sorry, but you don't drink tea in Italy. We'll have something else." All that stuff's good, and he's probably a lot more personable than Fred Vasseur. But what is he actually going to do?
But does Lando Norris have the mental fortitude minerals to beat Oscar and win a championship in 2025? Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, one of the, if not the goatiest F1 minds who have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D. Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm very well, Cameron. Yeah, a bit of a long weekend, particularly with that delayed start, wasn't it? But we got through it. Belgian Grand Prix now over. Move on to Hungary now. Double header before the August break.
Just a bit of a long Grand Prix, Mr. Windsor,
Yeah.
eh? Just a bit. Out of the back of the Spa-Francorchamps Belgian Grand Prix, round 13, 2025, what do you think, as has become mandatory, was the biggest story to come out of the race weekend?
Well, I hate to say it, but I think it was the way Lando lost the Belgian Grand Prix. I say I hate to say it. And I've got to begin by saying there's so much polarization in Formula One these days, partly because of social media, and we all know the reasons for it. And so it seems that if you rate Oscar, you've got to loathe Lando, or you love Lando, you've got to hate Oscar. And I hope enough viewers, listeners, whatever, know that by now I try not to fall into that category at all. I try to look at every driver in their own merit, objectively, relatively. I mean, obviously, I've got my friends and guys that I like, and I think they do a great job. Others that I'm less, into. But I try to be down the middle. So if I'm going to say something like, I thought Lando did a great job here, it doesn't mean that I think Oscar did a terrible job there. I just want to say that as a precursor. But getting down to it, I think, I mean, you can look at Lando's weekend in two ways. He either wimped out completely and showed no courage at all when he decided to go to hard tires and take himself away from a direct race with Oscar. And I've spoken to a few driver mates about that, and they all think, yeah, bit of a wimp doing that, really. It's simple to say that. On the other side of the coin, as I said in my video yesterday, I think on the pit wall, it wasn't a bad call. And bearing in mind the race quite clearly was going to be dry to the finish, not clearly, but 99% sure was going to be dry to the finish. And the medium was a bit of an unknown quantity. Look at George Russell, even in qualifying on mediums on Friday, in SQ3. Going to the hard was not a bad call. And we know, I mean, the problem was the hard was super hard in Spa. It's a big gap, a much bigger gap than normal between the hard and the medium. Very rarely do we see that. It's normally a relatively sort of equally balanced relationship between the three compounds, but it wasn't in Spa. They changed it from last year, and they do that, Pirelli, because they're always under pressure to try and make the pit stop situation, the strategy, more dramatic and complicated. Not something that not something that I would adhere to. But anyway, going down that path even further, I think from Lando's point of view, he thought, well, I'm on the hards. I can really push like crazy now because I ain't going to go off. And who knows, I could still maybe get it if Oscar's mediums do go off. The problem was, in my opinion, the weather then changed and went much cooler, and the cloud cover came, and it looked as though it was going to rain like 10 minutes after the checkered flag. And that took all the performance away from the hard. So Lando was driving on the absolute limit on those hards, not really in the right temperature window. And that's why he, locked up. And this is where I go back to what I was saying at the start. I'm not making excuses for Lando's mistakes. All I'm saying is That's why he did it, because he was absolutely on the limit. And that's why he went wide at point. That's why he locked up. So you then think, well, that was a mistake. And running the hards, he should have run the mediums. Yep. Okay. I go along with that. But there was no way, actually, I think, he was going to beat Oscar on the mediums. He'd had the slow pit stop and he was now 8 seconds behind. So how was he going to beat Oscar Piastri? Yeah, his tyres were going to be 1 lap newer. But it wasn't a great race back end. He might as well have flipped the coin and gone for it. So what am I saying here? I'm saying it's a fairly significant moment in the career path of Lando Norris 2025 World Championship, because he was on the pole and he didn't win the race. And then, of course, there was the other issue. And I don't really know enough about hybrid engines and how they actually work with all this harvesting of power. But Lando's saying, once he got blown away by Oscar up the straight on the opening lap, what happened to my pack, which I think means the power pack? And they came back with an answer. And he said, well, that was all that faffing around with leading the pack behind the safety car that did that. You got to say, well, that's not Formula One, is it? If that's what happens, something ridiculous like that, you lose that amount of power. Because he was like 10 kilometers slower than Max Verstappen on the straight on the open lap. And Max was covered with wing. And we all know how slow he was on the straight. Lando was much slower than that. No wonder it was so easy for Oscar just to blast past. And again, I'm not detracting from Oscar's bravery and his courage and his commitment and everything else. Fabulous pass. I'm just saying it was a mess, wasn't it, from Lando's point of view?
Yeah.
I guess, what do I think was the most significant thing? That the FIA decided not to do a standing start, to be honest. I think, we had that delay, which I think was unnecessary. And then we didn't even get a standing start out of it. I think that was pathetic. And we should have had a standing start. It was easily dry enough to have a standing start. I don't know what they were thinking about having that rolling start. I guess they were thinking we got to take a bit more water out of the line, behind the safety car. Well, even then, bring the field up to the grid and do a standing start. And I think that was wrong. I think the whole thing was wrong because we were robbed of a wet Belgian Grand Prix, which I was looking forward to be honest. I love wet Belgian Grand Prix. I love wet Grand Prix in general, and we never got that. Can I ramble on a bit more, Cameron? Because there's one other thing I want to say on the back of that, which is, so I'm not giving you a chance to say yes or no, but I think that we've got to the point now where whenever it's really wet, we don't race. And as we were talking after Silverstone, a lot of people were saying, what's the point of having the extreme wets if we never use them? And it's the same now, the extreme wet. Oh, no, we better not race, better come in. I mean, Formula One has always been about racing in all conditions. That's what makes one of the differences between Formula One and IndyCar and everything else. We race in all conditions, and we're not now. And I think that's wrong. And I think it's sad. And we got to get control of it because it's too conservative now. It's much too conservative. We should have raced. I don't know what Jackie Ickx, who was out there with a checkered flag, drove one of the greatest wet weather races of all time to win the 68 French Grand Prix in the wet, Rouen, from start to finish. What he thought about it all. There he is, a Belgian megastar, and they didn't race in the wet. Actually, to be honest with you, they, what Terry Newell would have thought about it all. I mean, he was there on Saturday, wasn't he, for Pirelli doing, well, not for Pirelli. He presented the Pirelli Award to Lando. Obviously, Ratley's on Hankook tyres now, but what he thought about it, I mean, can you imagine in Rally? It's raining, better not go out. Mud, no way. In fact, what they should have done, I know Terry probably was at home watching it on TV, having done his thing on Saturday or Friday, whenever it was. They should have got Terry to be there on Sunday in case it was wet and they had this delay. So he could have done, 20 minutes or an hour of driving around in some mega car, showing what it looks like to drive well in the wet. That would have been fun, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't have been bad. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let me push back on your points respectfully. And I agree with you, mate. Like, I don't want to wait 2 hours before we get a race. Like when there's rain, an opportunity for a rain-strewn race, and then you get to see the Reagan Meisters, the guys with the finely tuned internal gyroscope, manage their cars in and on around the limits of adhesion. Like, I wanted nothing more. But Peter, I remember once upon a time you told me that you've attended far too many funerals. Ergo F1, they can never make it too safe. Lest we forget, August the 31st, 2019, Antoine Hubert around Spa-Francorchamps. Eau Rouge, Radiant, super quick, very high speed, contoured elevation, and therefore very dangerous. So, I mean, Carlos Sainz said it better than I ever could, right? It's better to err on the side of caution, especially around Spa-Francorchamps. and it being so rainy than to go ahead and have another incident. R.I.P. Antoine Hubert, August the 31st, 2019, though.
Yeah, and Antoine's not the only driver, sadly, we've lost because of conditions like that. I'm not saying we should have raced when the race was due to start. And I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, I think they waited too long, and I don't think we should have had a rolling start. That's what I'm saying. I think they should have started about 35, 40 minutes after the start, once the heavy rain had just eased off. They could have gone out then, done 2 or 3 laps behind the safety car, and then come up to the grid and started then. Yeah, there would have been spray. It would have been difficult. But then again, if we're going to say we're not going to have Formula One now, when there's no spray, when there's spray and when there's standing water, and when it's possible that you might lose control on the straight, then we might as well say, let's not do any wet races at all. Let's just keep everything dry. And we're almost at that point now, to be honest. I mean, as Max said, he was behind the safety car. And this is before they decided to abort the race. He said, we've got to come in, but don't make it too long. Otherwise, this isn't going to be a wet race. And he was right. And then they went out again. And he said, if we do more than 2 laps on the safety car, it'll be dry within 5 laps. And he was right again. And I think they're just saying. And anyway, I want to get on to the next point now. I totally respect what you're saying, and I don't think they should have started when they did, but I think they should have started much sooner than they did, and I think we should have had a rolling start. Sorry, a standing start. Beyond that, Laurent Mekies used to work at the FIA, right? 2 years, I think he was at the FIA, particularly on the safety side. Now, he's now team principal of Red Bull, and I find it odd that in this era of conservatism, of erring on the side of safety, as you just described, as I prescribe as well, that when Red Bull at some point before Parc Ferme, before the race, said it's going to be wet on Sunday, we don't want the drama we had at Silverstone, let's put wing on the car, we'll lose top speed, but we just give Max sector 2, and then that's the way to approach this. I find it odd that somebody who hadn't spent 2 years with the FIA, knowing the way they think now, and very well connected, I would guess, with the FIA, wouldn't have said at that point, as some sort of devil's advocate, if it's that wet to the point where Max is going to be super slow on the straight, and that's the extreme of wing you're thinking of running, bear in mind, they may not even race. I can imagine most team principals wouldn't think that, because they're all racers and they think, oh yeah, it's wet, put the wing on, or this or that, Fernando in the wet, Carlos Sainz, mega. But if you've actually had 2 years at the FIA, wouldn't you be predicting exactly what would happen?
Yeah.
Because, who's got a better feel for how conservative the FIA stewards are now and the race control is now than, say, Laurent Mekies, because that's what he used to do. And yet Red Bull started with a car on a virtually dry track with ridiculous rear wing on it that basically made Max a sitting duck. I find that odd, really. I mean, if he's not going to have that sort of input, what is he going to have? I mean, he's very good in a million ways, but that's the area where you'd really expect him to be super good, is it not?
I agree, Peter. I think there's more than a smidgen of overlay of recency bias, just because Max tried to run a low downforce wing at the very last race at the British Grand Prix and paid the penalty. It was like, well, we can't. You can make mistakes in Formula One, but you can't make the same mistake so recently after you made it the first time round. So I think I extend Laurent. I understand the criticism, but I extend him a little bit of grace, because what he didn't want to do first time round is do exactly what they did at the British Grand Prix, and then Max ends up, do you know what I mean, coming off track because he doesn't have enough downforce, especially when it was a big rain forecast. I don't know. It's impossible to predict the movements of the FIA.
I agree with you. You never want to repeat the same mistake. But as you just said, especially when it was a big rain forecast, that's when you predict that the race probably won't be held or will be delayed massively. That's when you make that prediction. That's what you get paid for, to make the big calls like that. Why did Charles Leclerc beat Max? Better top speed.
Yeah.
And so that's all that was. Great driving as well, wonderful defense, and for all the mistakes Charles being criticized for making, quite justifiably so in most cases, no mistakes at all, apart from one small lockup. Just brilliant under pressure
Yeah.
from Max rather. So yeah, we've had that bit. And the other thing I wanted to say, and this is just me being me, but when the safety car is going round, and you see these Formula One cars all trying to get temperature in the tires and the braking and everything else. And I know they relaxed the rules in terms of how far you could get behind and so forth. And you're looking at this big Aston Martin Vantage sort of wallowing from side to side, which we're told is the fastest Vantage ever made. Not that that means a lot. I'm thinking this is not a good look either. Why haven't we got like a GT3 RS Porsche there at the front,
Oof.
looking a little bit more as if it knows what it's doing, and and upping the pace a bit? Bernd Mailander does a brilliant job in that Aston, but they would have been quicker. And I don't know how many messages Bernd gives back to race control about what he thinks about the conditions, but I'd be willing to bet that if he was in a GT3 RS, he'd be saying different things about the track conditions than he was in this Vantage thing. And so, to me, it's not a good look that Formula One has got one of its teams and sponsors to do the safety car. We should have the best possible safety car we can have. And to me, that would be something like a GT3 Porsche. Yeah. And don't forget, Porsche do have a bit of a family involvement with Formula One anyway through the Super Cup thing. So it's not as if it's going out on a limb there. I just think it's a bit of a weird look, that sort of thing wallowing around. You agree with me or not? Am I the only person in the world?
No.
I mean, it doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, the Vantage is a quick car designed for comfort, isn't it? For sort of gentlemen to think, oh, I've got a quick car here, and then cruise along the motorway and not feel the speed bumps or whatever. Whereas a GT3 RS is a bit more in keeping with what you'd expect Formula One to have.
I would agree with that, Peter. I suppose the only problem is there's money wrapped up in this, right? The
money?
Aston and Mercedes have got to pay for the
privilege. For that, are they?
Aston and Mercedes apparently pay for the privilege, and I'm not sure that Porsche will be prepared to match them.
Of course they wouldn't, and of course Aston Martin do pay enormous amounts of money, but this is a very important thing, the safety car. And for most conditions, that Vantage is fine. But I don't think it looked great in the heavy rain yesterday. And my heart went out to Bernd Mailander and what it's having to do with that thing.
Outside of its natural habitat ever so slightly.
Yeah, definitely. And again, to repeat the point, or even a Porsche Dakar or something would have been better, wouldn't it?
True. Not a bad shout. Peter, I want to bring you back to one of the original points that you made at the outset. Lando Norris has caught a lot of flack. Again, if you look at the stats, 7 out of the 10 times that he started on pole last year, seven of those 10 times, 70%, he failed to consolidate for the P1, the pole, at the end of the first lap. Same thing again this race week. It's a chaotic stat, right? Same thing again this race weekend, potentially at the Ultra Spa Eau Rouge, it's slipstream, and he didn't have a battery that was charging properly. But it feels like Oscar Piastri, I had a look back at the way that Oscar set Lando up through La Source and then going into Le Calm. And it reminded me a lot of lap 59, 2021, Brazil, Lewis Hamilton on Max. It felt like this was Oscar's kind of... He's growing from a caterpillar into a butterfly ever so slightly. That he filtrated out for his mistakes of the unforced variety to zero as near as makes no difference. You've got Lando Norris in his 7th or 8th season now, who can't seem to keep his focus. I mean, Singapore 2024, very similar thing. Even though that day was brilliant and dominated 99% of the race, you still get these lapses in concentration and focus almost from Lando. I mean, you said it on the video that you could have been further at 2, 3, 4 seconds up the road, but for the mistake in Puan, and then there was turn 1 again, and it's like I say all that to say this, Peter. Is Lando Norris? I'm not talking about his brilliance behind the wheel, because he's plenty quick enough, and I wouldn't question his racecraft necessarily. But does Lando Norris have the mental fortitude minerals to beat Oscar and win a championship in 2025?
Probably not. Oscar's such a simple, uncomplicated, natural racer, as well as an incredibly fast driver. That's a very, very difficult combination to beat. As I said from day one, from the millisecond that Zak Brown signed him, and replace Daniel Ricciardo, I've been saying this is a huge problem for Lando Norris. And so I don't change my opinion on that at all. The guy's super quick, and just little things like, going down the hill after La Source. Forget about the exit from La Source. Down the hill, Oscar's backing off to give himself just the right amount of room he needs to be closing on Lando on the exit of Raidillon at the top. Absolutely beautiful bit of driving. But then again, what else could Lando have done but stay flat, maximum revs in 6, got 7th, and then went into Eau Rouge. He's leading the race. He doesn't know what the grip level's like with fuel, with the wet, what the track's like at that moment. He backs off. Oscar backs off. But Oscar's got this gap that he can use. And it was a better situation to be P2 there, to be quite honest. I'm not, again, making excuses for Lando. I'm just saying that P2 there was a perfect position to be. And then Oscar maximized that position. And I think, didn't one of them say, actually being second in qualifying is a pretty good result?
Oscar.
One of them did, yeah, I think Oscar did. And then on top of that, he would have been, I suppose the amazing thing is he didn't run into the back of Lando, how slowly Lando had been going on the exit of Raidillon. And he had to pull out pretty quickly, didn't he? And so, yeah, and obviously in terms of everything else we've been talking about, that decision to go to hard tires, not pushing Oscar hard enough after that. Once he did get the power he needed on the straight, he wasn't sort of doing what a Nigel Mansell would have been doing to a Nelson Piquet in that situation. He was sort of waiting and, dancing around. And I think that is the difference, isn't it? And I don't know. Yeah, I can't say any more than that. I mean, you've got these two contrasting characters. You've got Lando on the pole with the big smile, happy, 2 wins behind him. He's now on the pole for the Belgian Grand Prix. The mum, the whole thing. It's almost glad happy, isn't it? And then you've got Oscar, quiet and very Jack Brabhamish, and disappointed, made a bit of a mess of turn 14, but yeah, see what happens tomorrow. Peter is not bad here. That's all you need to say. And you knew it. You knew what was going to happen. And that's what is going to probably define the World Championship. It's those two contrasts. And what have I been saying for, I don't know how many months now? The best thing Lando can do is stop all that stuff and just focus on his side of the garage and switch himself off so that people start saying, oh, what's happened to Lando? He's not talking anymore. That's probably a better way for him to be. I still say that. I mean, I think he's got a lot of talent. There's no doubt about it. He's a very, very good racing driver. But he's got this incredibly difficult guy to beat. And I think anyone would find it. I think even Max, if he was at McLaren, would find it. He'd find Oscar would be the guy that would be giving him more attention probably than any other driver on the grid. I mean, he's very good, Oscar Piastri. And just to repeat the obvious, if they'd never hired Oscar and they'd kept Daniel Ricciardo, I think Lando would be leading the World Championship by 100 points now.
Yeah.
That's true. And they'd be probably 1-2 still. That's the difference. It's just got this incredibly good guy in the other car. And it's showing up the couple of faults that Lando's got. And he's got faults. So has Oscar got a couple of faults. But, in terms of psychology, not as many as Lando.
Yeah. And ultimately, Peter, many are saying that could be the difference as far as deciding who's going to be the Drivers' Championship in 2020. There's not a lot between them, right, in terms of absolute pace. I mean, Lando drops it on pole, but then it's just another Lando Norris mistake-strewn Grand Prix. It's like, I don't know, it's frustrating, Peter.
Yeah, I know, and there's a couple of things that they said that made me think about them a little bit more. One was how Oscar went on about how he loves Spa. It's just his favorite circuit, and even if it's not, that's the right thing to say because it's a steely circuit, and every race driver wants to think that Spa is their favorite circuit, and that's kind of what he should be saying. Well, it is exactly what he should be saying to psych out Lando. I never heard Lando say that. In fact, I heard the opposite. I heard him saying, "Oh, I'm looking forward to Hungary. I love Hungary." Which is sort of Mickey Mouse track with lots of slow corners. I mean, if anything sums up the difference between those two, it's that. No race driver should, when they're at Spa, should say, "Oh, I'm looking forward to Hungary." They shouldn't be doing that. You can imagine Michael saying that. No, or Nigel or anyone. Nobody would. Jochen Rindt. if he'd been around. So, that was one. The other was a rather quaint thing that Lando said when he did get the pole was, and he got it on his first lap in Q3, remember, not the second. He said something like, yeah, well, people don't really know what's going on, but yeah, I've got a bit of a toe. It's nice not to be first out. Sometimes that helps. And yet he didn't really get a toe. He was behind Oscar there, and he was in front of Oscar, obviously, for the last run. And I think he was, so I thought, why would he have said that? And it's probably his way of trying to psych out Oscar in thinking, Oscar didn't realize he's giving me a toe there, and I got the toe from him. That'll make Oscar think a bit. I think that's kind of what it was. I guess I can't imagine it was anything else. And I thought, well, it's kind of reverse psychology, isn't it? It's being complimentary to make the other guy think, did I actually help Lando there? I don't think he did, actually. I think he was sufficiently far in front. No. Maybe 1 kilometer, maybe if you look at the speed traces, it was like 1 kilometer he was quicker than Oscar on that lap. But I thought that was an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, really. And not the last of his quotables that were interesting over the course of the weekend, Peter. I think there's a very fine line between cope and delusion. I think Lando's saying these things before the accredited press and media with a view to kind of big himself up, convince himself of the fact that he's still the man about town at McLaren. He came out post-race and he said something to the effect of, I made mistakes, but Oscar made them as well. It's like, what? This is the difference, Lando, in extents and not kinds. I didn't see Oscar making a mistake where he left the island at Pouan or any. No, he's not making those same type of mistakes. So I don't know. I think Lando has a crisis of confidence now, Peter, and I think all of the quotables, questionable all, are a function of that. He's trying to G himself up right and convince himself that 16 points, whatever, like I'm still in the championship and I need to keep my head in the game. But the quotables are very ostensibly incorrect, evidensively so, Peter. What? What's he on about?
Well, at least he didn't fall into the trap that Eddie Irvine once fell into when I was talking to him in the days when Michael was blowing him away and winning championships. I said, Eddie, how do you feel about I don't know how I phrased it, something along the lines of how do you feel about, you compared with Michael and how your driving's going? He said, well, I won't do the Irish accent because people give me a hard time now. But he said to me, well, for every race Michael wins, I feel that's a win for me because I was one of the guys that put this whole team together with Michael. And so I feel a part of everything that's happening. And to his credit, Lando didn't say that after the race. He didn't say, well, every time Oscar wins, I feel it's a win for me because without me, McLaren wouldn't be where they are today. I joined them on the way up and I've helped put this team together the way they are. And I've selected with Zach quite a lot of the engineer. He didn't say any of that, which was good, all credit to him. But to say Oscar made mistakes, the difference is if Oscar made mistakes, he was immediately able to cover them and actually not let them show in the lap time. Whereas when Lando makes a mistake, he runs into goes up to Liège in the middle of Pouan.
Incredible, Peter.
Well, yeah. The other thing is, it is actually interesting, isn't it? I think we're quite lucky to have these two contrasting personalities, talents, drivers, names in the McLarens fighting like this, because it could be an easy walkover if they had a clear number one, number two situation with a slower driver in the other car. We've got this battle. But the interesting thing is, I don't know what your take is on this, it doesn't look as if the public are that into it. It doesn't look as if this is great for Formula One. I don't know why. Maybe McLaren, most people think McLaren's got a boring team or something. I don't know. But if this was Max versus Charles or Max versus George or Lewis versus Charles or whatever, I think everyone would be a lot more fired up, wouldn't they? Or is that just my imagination?
No, I think you're onto something there, Peter. I think you are onto something there. The personalities probably aren't big enough. And if it's a McLaren, that takes away the uncertainty of which car's going to win. Well, I can turn my TV off and come back in 2 hours' time, and I know it will be a papaya-coloured car. And to that point, I was talking with mates earlier on. There was a brilliant reel on, I think it was on Twitter, I want to say, where they were looking at the personalities in 2012, Peter, and you had Kimi and you had Button and you had Sebastian and you had Lewis and you had Alonso and you had Koba. It was like you couldn't even you could even get more personalities, more outspoken ones, and now it just feels like there's a kind of black hole of particularly now as Christian Horner's gone. I mean, I know you're not a Drive to Survive fan, Peter, but a Drive to Survive sans Christian Horner, is that even Drive to Survive anymore? Like, it's not even worth tuning
Well,
in.
who's to say he won't be in it in
Oh,
some
yeah,
form
true.
or another
No,
in the
but yeah.
future?
Yeah.
No, but you mentioned Drive to Survive, and here's me showing my ignorance. But surely, because of Drive to Survive, surely guys like Lando and Oscar are now much bigger than Jenson Button or Nico Rosberg or any of those guys from that era. Are they not? Because of the enormous success of Drive to Survive?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they be absolutely huge, total megastars of global proportions?
I just think no, they are in absolute terms. They're even inflation adjusted, right? They're bigger stars by the number because social media is a bigger thing now than it was then, if it even existed in 2012. But I think what we're talking about here, Peter, is reasons to watch, and it's not because Lando's a bigger star than Button, or that Button is a bigger star than Lando is now. It's the interaction. It's the friction between a Button and a Hamilton then, or an Alonso and a Hamilton. And that was just another, even if the race was boring, you wanted to see, I don't know, what Kimi was going to say. There was just so many more reasons to watch it. I sound like the old guy, like with a stick waving at the moon now, don't I? But there were just so many more reasons to watch in 2012 by dint of the friction between these very big personalities. Who is there now other than Max and Lewis and Fernando you can put in there? The rest of them are very cookie cutter and are always going to say the PR friendly quotable, right? They're all probably a bit too well behaved per se.
But isn't that what Drive to Survive is supposed to be doing? Not making them cookie cutters, and indeed giving them all these, granular personalities that everybody can love and hate, or love or hate. Isn't that what Drive to Survive is supposed to be all about?
Exactly.
If it's not doing that, then how has it been successful? I don't understand. I mean, surely you've got no better tool than Drive to Survive to create all these different personas, the ones you want to love, the ones you want to hate.
Yeah.
Why haven't they done that? Why haven't they got a sort of black and white thing between Oscar and Lando?
I think they have. I think they've done it to a certain extent, but having edited a one or two documentary style videos myself in my time, you still need the raw materials, right? So just straight off the top of the head, Christian Horner gives you, Toto, fix your effing car. Do you know what I mean? Like he was always, whatever you want to say about Christian, polemic and controversial as he was always, he was a brilliant anti-hero, like impossible theatre. And so removing him and then removing Gunther Steiner and the Danny Rick, like two of the OGs of Drive to Survive, it's like, whatever, they haven't got any, they have zero material, Peter. It's going to be an interesting season. It's
all to do with having the right director and getting the drivers to say the right things in the right scenario, is it not? Yeah. Everything is fake anyway, more or less. You're going to do a road trip. You don't just say, oh, this is really boring, nothing's happening. You create a puncture, or your car gets robbed, or whatever. You run out of fuel, don't you? You create these things to make it all happen. Isn't that what they do with Oscar and Lando? Don't they create things for them to have to react to?
Yeah, I Top Gear it to a certain extent. I don't think they can, though, because the drivers are so time short. I don't think they'd have them Clarkson and May and Hammond. They couldn't create not that extensive narrative. I don't think. Not that I'm close enough to say definitively.
To me, Oscar's a very endearing racing driver. I say endearing; it's probably the wrong word. A fascinating racing driver, and I wouldn't be able to get enough of him if I could really know what was going on in his brain and the way he thinks about racing. And I think that would translate brilliantly into a doc. And I think the same for Lando. He's completely different, but you focus on the differences and you really bring that out. Thanks. But at the moment, for somewhat reason I don't understand, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in either McLaren driver or McLaren winning Formula One races. Maybe it's the whole McLaren thing. They're just too perfect or something. I don't know. Maybe it's that. Is it that?
They are quite PR friendly. I think it's just that F1 in 2025, Peter, is now devoid of uncertainty. You take away, if I know between two drivers who's going to win every single race, then Why not go and doom scroll TikTok, or go and take the wife and the little one out to go and see the F1 movie? Do you know what I mean? It's time better spent, because I know it's going to be Oscar or it's going to be Lando, because so brilliant is Rob Marshall's McLaren 39. It's I don't know, Peter, but hopefully somebody else can keep them honest. Not named.
I mean,
Max.
You use the word certainty or uncertainty, or those two words. I mean, for me, again, it comes down to some extent to DRS, because DRS neutralizes the gambles that some teams and drivers take by running less or more wing. By the time the race comes and you get in a DRS train, it doesn't really make any difference. And that's the problem with DRS. If there was no DRS in the sprint race, we would have had more overtaking, for sure, because some drivers were running less wing, they can get a tow, they can get fast. But because DRS is so much more dominating than the differences in rear wing settings from car to car, everybody's neutralized, everybody gets in a DRS train, nobody can overtake. How long is it going to take before that penny drops in Formula One?
Wow.
And it's the same in the dry as well, in the normal Grand Prix. And to me, if they want more overtaking, get rid of DRS.
Blimey, Peter. This is how you really feel, Mr. Windsor.
Well, it is. It's not how I feel. To me, it's actual reality. It's no longer. It's a bit like taking a gamble on the race being wet and running a lot of downforce. Chances are the FIA will stall the race anyway until it's dry. It's a bit like, top speed now. You might as well just go for as much downforce as you can run within reason, because DRS is always going to be there for you. And DRS kind of is ruining it, in my opinion. It's ruining the driver's ability to defend. It's ruining the gamble that you can take to run less or more wing, because everything is neutralized by this massive, great thing of flattening the rear wing. Why was there no overtaking in the sprint race? Because of that. What was everybody complaining about afterwards? Oh, we were in the DRS train.
It's not easy, Mr. Windsor, this DRS thing. I think we'll be discussing this.
It is easy. You just ban it. And don't
just get rid of.
Now, guess what? They're going to do even more DRS next. Next active DRS.
Active aero.
It is active aero.
Absolutely not dangerous and perfectly safe.
No. There's no way Jack Doohan had that shunt at Suzuka. Didn't happen. Nothing
to see here. Peter, okay. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Talk to me about Scuderia Ferrari, because a lot was made of Lewis Hamilton's drive. I've made a lot of Lewis Hamilton's drive, to be fair, because for a while there, I've been critical of Lewis all season long. It's been 13 races now that he hasn't podiumed. That's the longest stint of his career without podium. That, to me, is indicative of not necessarily him being past his prime, but him struggling and wrestling with the acclimatisation process with the red car, with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop. That being said, he's getting much closer in absolute terms to Charles Leclerc, but then he goes and misses out on Q2, both sprint and Grand Prix qualifying sessions. So what did you make of Lewis's drive during the first stint? Did you think that was an indication potentially that the old Lewis said that he was the Rye House Lewis for a stint? Is that proof positive that the glint is still there in Sir Lewis Hamilton's eye?
Well, I said after the British Grand Prix that I felt he was starting to drive like the old Lewis. I said that in the videos, and that he was starting to get into the corners a bit earlier and really looking as if he could feel the front. And I think he was driving that way on Friday at Spa, and I thought he looked really good in the car. And I think he drove pretty well in the race. I say pretty well because from where he started, it was obviously incredibly difficult. Then he was the first to stop, which allowed him to vault past about 5 cars because of that. So we shouldn't get too excited about all the cars he passed, but he did pass quite a few cars in the wet, in fairness to him, on intermediates, no doubt about that. He was driving well as he'd driven at Silverstone, in my opinion. And then he came up behind Alex Albon and couldn't get past him for the rest of the race, which is okay. Obviously, Lewis had more wing and he was slower in the straight line and everything we're talking about. But to be stuck behind a Williams for most of the Grand Prix in the dry was not a good look, in my opinion. So you need to bear that in mind. Then you go into why he was so slow in both the qualifying sessions. The first one, he was first on the scene. I think it's first or second on the scene after Kimi had gone off, and there was stuff everywhere. And he didn't back off, but he had a moment, and that kind of killed his lap. So then he came out of the lap, but he'd used a lot of the tires by then. So then he had to do another slower. Then he did his quick lap again, and then he was that lap would have put him easily into SQ2, no problem at all, until he got to the bus stop chicane, and then he hit the brakes, and in the normal Lewis way, nothing dramatic, and the back end just locked and he went round. I said at the time, because there seemed to be no explanation at all from the team about what had happened, and Lewis looked confused, that it just looked to me like the medium tyre, which George Russell had a lot of problem getting to work, overheating as well. Just literally couldn't take it anymore, and he just lost the rear because of that. We now know that there was some mysterious new component he was running in the back of the car, i.e., they say, i.e., rear suspension, which, I mean, I'm assuming it was something to do with the diff or something like that, but they keep saying rear suspension, which is odd. I just still can't even imagine what that is. And that was the cause of the problem. But then again, you have to question Fred Vasseur at this point, because he's putting out a statement immediately after sprint qualifying saying Lewis locked the rear brakes. He didn't say the rear brakes locked in the passive, i.e., something might have gone wrong. He said Lewis locked the rear brakes, which, as we all know, everybody who works in motor racing, means driver error. He locked the brakes. Why would he say that when they're running a different component on the back of Lewis's car compared with Charles, which they now admit, and it was a new component which had already given problems when Charles had tried it, similar problems? Why would he say that? I mean, that to me is shocking, to be honest. I find that absolutely incorrect that a team principal would say something like that. Now, maybe he said it all in French or Italian and it got poorly translated into English, but they've got enough English speakers there to be able to read through that and say, no, don't say that, because that implies Lewis himself made the mistake straight away. So that was wrong to do that. But then when Lewis discovered that there was something going on, or he finally realized why he'd lost the back, I think he was then quite, obviously quite relaxed that it was out of his control. And then we get to the mistake at Radillon, which is, inexcusable really, because as early as free practice, I think Oscar did the same thing.
Yeah.
And had the track delete tacked on. Yeah, it was SQ1, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. Or SQ2 maybe. And he had to do that second lap, and he just got in. And, so that was an alarm. If Oscar's going to do that, we all need to be very wary of us doing it as well. And what is that? Is that Ferrari blinkered, not reminding their drivers of that all the time, bearing in mind Piastri's doing that in a much better car? And then Lewis does it. It was pretty marginal, but he does it and lost the lap. And that was not good, was it? So, I think he's driving better than he has been. I think he's got more confidence in the car, and the upgrades, I think, seem to be working better than, say, the Aston Martin upgrades are working. But we'll see how it goes in Hungary. He should, if he's not super quick in Hungary, by which I mean just ahead of Charles or exactly the same lap time as Charles, then we need to think, ain't going to happen. Really, to be honest. I just hope he is quick there. And he looked good. He looked good in the car, as I say. Front end he's using the front end well, and that was good. But stuck behind Albon for the rest of the race. It's not very.
It doesn't bode well. But
no.
The overarching, most pertinent point, though, Peter, is the Frederick Vasseur one, though.
Yeah.
That it's apparent that John Elkann has harboured aspirations for more than a few years to replace Frederick Vasseur with someone called Christian Horner, that he likes his very maverick, cavalier way of running F1 teams. So too, it feels like Frederick Vasseur hasn't got he's in a George Russell type dilemma, right, contractually, in that they haven't, if you want to keep a team principal and his contract runs out at the end of this calendar year, surely you throw another contract at him and a pen and allow him to write his own number. There is no more damning indication from Scuderia that they want rid of Frederick Vasseur. I read somewhere earlier that Fred was lucky that Christian Horner has taken some of the the attention light out of the F1 room, because otherwise all that the Italian press and media would have been talking about for the past 2 weeks would have been Frederic Vasseur and how long can he hold on to his tenure, his place at Ferrari as team principal. I ask you the question this way, Peter, will Frederic Vasseur make it out of 2025 as team principal of Scuderia Ferrari?
Well, if I was in charge of the budget for Ferrari, if I was John Alcon, I wouldn't change anything because the horse is bolted. They don't have Adrian Newey, and they replace Carlos Sainz when they didn't need to replace him. So they've done all that. Now all they can do is make the best of what they've got, i.e. a technical department that's not too bad, but not as good as McLaren's, quite clearly, and certainly not as good as Aston Martin's will be next year when Adrian's car comes on stream. And they've got Lewis, and you'd bank on Fred's knowledge and understanding of the way Lewis works and thinks and drives being a good thing. Although, as I say, Fred's comment after qualifying on Friday, public comment, which everybody can read, they go to the Ferrari website, to me was inexcusable. You don't say that. You don't say a driver locked the rear brakes if he didn't, if something else locked the rear brakes. And that's, the implication from what he said was that it was driver error. That's wrong. And if I was Lewis, I'd be absolutely livid about that. But obviously he's not. And I'm sure he loves Fred and everything that's going on. I don't know. What can I say? I suppose he probably will get fired. That's the way Ferrari are. To me, it would be a meaningless firing, because if Christian goes there, he will do a good job because he's a good racing guy and he's got a good racing brain. But what will he be able to do, short of bringing completely new engineering team to Ferrari that will produce a car as good as a McLaren? What will he do? He's got. I just don't understand what he will do differently. He'll just go in and do all the normal things, and that'll be it.
Yeah, or maybe Peter, or maybe not. I think Ferrari could use a fire starter like Christian Horner for all of the controversy. I think they need a kind of Caesar at the gate, and overseeing kind of like omnipotent team principal. I think they could do with something like that, because I feel like Frederic Vasseur, that if he does get sacked, it will be at the altar of infrastructure. And I mean, what he's failed to do is what Jean Todt did so brilliantly during his tenure, famously to 5 drivers' championships between 2000 and 2004, encircle the wagons around his team members and personnel, away from the politicking of the C-suite exec level bods at Scuderia Ferrari. It feels like that somehow in July of 2025 has seeped down to the likes of Aloy and all the engineers. They're critically aware now that their team principal is potentially on the way out because they haven't handled the contract situation as some are saying that they should have. So I don't know.
I mean, it's easy to say that, I think, from the outside looking in, comparing the two situations, but they're completely different. At that time of Jean Todt, it wasn't difficult to get a guy like Michael to bring with him all these good guys from Benetton and take them to Ferrari. Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, Nigel Stepney, all those guys came with Michael, and there was no issue at all. These days, no chance to do that. Everybody's got the gardening leave and this and that. You can't contractually get people to leave with you. That's the first point. And secondly, we were in a tyre war at that point, and the reason he was able to circle the wagons and keep everything as neat and as compact as it was because he did this amazing deal with Michael, with Ross, to ensure that Ferrari were on Bridgestones, and then they made sure that McLaren went to Michelin, which effectively left Ferrari the only quick team on Bridgestone, with Bridgestone basically building special tyres for Ferrari. And thus we had 4 world championships in a row with Michael Schumacher. That was a brilliant thing. And Jean Todt should take a lot of credit for that. But you couldn't do that today. I mean, Christian Horner's not going to arrive at Ferrari and say, I've got the masterstroke. Michelin are coming into Formula exclusively for Ferrari, and we're going to build special tyres with Michelin. If that happened, I can tell you now, they would win 10 world championships in a row. But it ain't going to happen. All those things that Jean Todt could play with don't exist today. It's a different world. It's a bureaucratic world of regulation, working with the FIA. You can't even, get away with cheating on the cars today. Nothing. They probably don't even have a cheating department anymore. And so, that's why I keep saying, what is it that Christian's going to bring? This magic ingredient that he's going to bring now that Freddie Vasseur didn't get Adrian Newey or didn't get any of the top McLaren guys, like Rob Marshall or Pete Prod or any of those guys, they're all staying where they are. What is it that Christian's going to bring? Because it's not just Christian. What can he do? All he is just a guy that's going to say, oh, good luck, Lewis, good luck, Charles, and engineers, everybody happy? Anybody need a cup of tea or whatever? Or, sorry, you don't drink tea in Italy, we'll have something else. All that stuff's good. And he's probably a lot more personable than Freddie Vasseur. But what is he actually going to do to make the car quicker? I don't understand why the Italian press or whoever it is saying all this thinks it's a magic bullet. I don't. It's too late now. They should have got Adrian Newey. They should have got Adrian Newey. They should have kept Carlos Sainz. That's all they needed to focus on, was getting Adrian. And if not Adrian, some other megastar designer that was going to do the job. An autocratic designer that comes in and says, right, this is the way it's going to be, just the way Ross Brawn did with Rory Byrne and the other team with Jean Todt. And that's fine. But that boat has sailed now. So what do they think Christian is going to bring?
Yeah.
I hope for Christian it happens, because I get on well with Christian, and it'd be a great thing for him, wouldn't it, after all this drama at Red Bull? But I don't see how he can do anything more than just be an average team principal like everybody else. As I say, Laurent Mekies, for me, is the guy that's unusual because he has this FIA background. And I was assuming that was the big card that he could play as a team principal, particularly at Red Bull now. And the first test we come to, where you need to be thinking, what are the FIA going to do here tomorrow? What is the right thing for us to anticipate that the FIA the race control might do? Laurent Mekies is your guy to make the most accurate prediction. And which team got it wrong by the biggest margin? Red Bull, by a mile. That's why I make that point. I'm not trying to be super critical of him, but I just think that is what he has. It's a unique quality that Laurent has. He actually worked for the FIA, for the modern FIA, for 2 years in the safety side.
It's a good show.
Christian Horner never did, and nor did Freddie Vasseur. But Freddie, for me, is he's disappointing, obviously, because he's just not. I mean, that missing Adrian, sacking Charles, and then this press comment about Lewis braking to effectively locking the rear wheels himself is inexcusable. Maybe that's not a sackable offence, but it's not a great thing, is it?
No.
He needs somebody out there guiding him more, probably.
He's not read the room, Freddie Vasseur, and sadly it feels like the sand timer has been turned around now on his tenure at Scuderia Ferrari. Mr. Bins of Super Generous with your time as always. I'll ask you a final one this way. It feels like Eric Van Haren of the Telegraph reported overnight that it feels and looks like Maximilian Verstappen is over the next couple of weeks going to announce that he will shun the attention of Lawrence Stroller over at Aston Martin. So to Toto Wolff, no chance, not at least for 2026, that his destination will be where he is now and he will stay at Red Bull. Do you think that's the right decision, Peter?
Well, that's what I've said he should do for the last 6 months, is it not? I've said, it would be crazy for Max to leave at the end of 2025 before he knows who's got the quick car in 26. Might be Red Bull, might be Mercedes, might be Ferrari, might be McLaren, could be anybody. Completely new regulations, power units are different, everything's different. So it behoves him logically to stay at Red Bull in 26, see who's got the quick car, make sure he's free and able to talk to anybody he wants to talk to from, say, August onwards, and do a Fangio and just go to whatever the best team is for 2027. That's completely logical, and I'm glad to see that's what he's doing, because he's a logical guy. Why wouldn't he do that? I think possibly part of that is that, and I find this hard to understand in a way, but apparently Adrian is very into Fernando. Having started to work with him, he really likes the way Fernando works, and I think Adrian's pushing quite hard to keep Fernando in the Aston Martin. I say hard to understand. It's not hard to understand that because Fernando's super quick and he's a good guy. What I find odd is that Adrian would be thinking in his brain, yeah, if it's Max or Fernando, I think I'll go with Fernando. I mean, good on him. He's got his own opinion and his own feeling, and that's what he's doing. Because obviously, there's not room for Fernando and Max at Aston Martin because they've got to get, the kid in there. So that's Aston Martin's door closed, it would seem. And then from Max's point of view, it then came down to Mercedes, I guess. And, as I said before, 6 of one, half a dozen the other.
Yeah.
Are Red Bull going to be good next year? Maybe not. Are Mercedes going to be good next year? Maybe not. So you stay where you are. The people. It's a bit of a fresh team with Laurent there, and let's go for it. Makes sense to me. But what they've got to do is, of course, get the other car sorted. They don't need someone that's going to be annoying for Max, but they certainly need somebody who's quick and can be up there. When you look at that, say that sprint race, and you've got the two McLarens there putting pressure on Max, and there's Max on his own. Where's the other Red Bull? Why isn't the other Red Bull in P4 or P3 annoying Lando or doing something like that? What's Yuki doing? He's down in the midfield doing nothing as ever. And it's, they need to get somebody quick in that other car. And that needs to be, in my opinion, it needs to be Carlos Sainz. But, I doubt that'll happen.
No.
Because I don't think Max wants Carlos in the team. I think it's a Max thing. And I think it goes back to when they were together at Toro Rosso for some reason. Probably because Carlos was quite quick relative to, he had a few moments, didn't he, when he was quicker than Max in that Toro Rosso. So it's probably that. Failing that, they need to put Hadjar in the car and just let him be the number two.
That I think now is the most likely eventuality, Peter.
Yeah.
That Hadjar's making his case in real time. I'll just say this very quickly. I read somewhere the other day that Adrian Newey had a fantastic working relationship with Max, but they weren't necessarily best mates. They weren't going to the local watering hole to discuss football or tennis or any other sport, apparently. And that Adrian Newey somehow, or at least Alonso, has endeared himself a lot to Adrian Newey more than maybe Max has. Interest in that. I thought that they were I presumed that Adrian and Max Verstappen, because they'd had so much success together, were best friends almost. Apparently not.
Yeah, I'm not that surprised if I think about it. Fernando's more refined than Max Verstappen, isn't he? As a guy that you go to dinner with or hang out with or chat to. Max is fairly blunt, obvious, in your face racing driver and just gets on with it. And Adrian's got some soft edges to him. Max is pretty blunt as a person. I'm only guessing here. I don't know that much. Whereas Fernando, I think, can sort of shape and mold his demeanor to whatever he wants to do. That's one of his great qualities. A very intelligent guy like that, and he's able to mix and match and be somebody that people love and really enjoy spending time with. And I think he's obviously, to say he's done a very good job on that with Adrian is to demean human relationships. He's obviously warmed to Adrian, and Adrian has warmed to Fernando. And that's no real surprise because there is a lot more than just Formula One in life, isn't there? There's a lot more than motor racing to life. And I think Adrian probably quite likes that about Fernando. And so, yeah, that's not a surprise. I mean, it's a complicated thing, isn't it? Because there's Adrian, who's actually the most important person in the world, really, in the life of any racing driver. Everybody wants to drive an Adrian Newey car. And yet he doesn't own the team, and he's the technical guy, whatever he is these days. I don't know what the title is. Something quite odd, isn't it? He's technical managing director or something.
Technical director, I thought.
Yeah, he's not a designer, and they used to be the old days like Derek Gardner with the six-wheel Tyrrell or Colin Chapman. So yeah, I think it's Fernando's done a very good job. There's no other way of phrasing it. I'm not saying it was work for him. He and Adrian have naturally become friends. And so that, it's not a surprise to me that. I suppose the real surprise then in that case is why Adrian didn't push Christian into signing Fernando when Fernando was walked away from Ferrari. Because they didn't even pick up the phone to Fernando. Thinking as I speak, maybe that's where the whole Adrian Newey, Christian Horner relationship broke down. Maybe it was that moment. Maybe Adrian thought, yeah, we got to get Fernando. And maybe Christian said, no way I want Fernando. It's too destructive, or whatever he might have said. And maybe then that's when it fell down, because they never ranked. Fernando never got a phone call from Red Bull.
I think that they wanted to sign Fernando. If rumor is to be believed, I think they wanted to sign Fernando in 2010, maybe, but then Seb got the jump, and I think maybe again in 2014. I'm not sure whether too many conversations were had around the time when they were, I don't know, getting rid of Checo. Not necessarily, because Alonso's. How do you think Max would react to have it? I know they're mates, but how do you think Max would react to
well, they were early days for Max, and bottom line is, a guy like Fernando isn't that available that often. Well, I suppose he is actually in his career, but he was available.
Yeah.
And Red Bull basically had a free seat, and they didn't ring him. Regardless of the other driver, regardless of Checo, regardless of anything else, they didn't ring him. And I imagine, given the way things are now, Adrian probably was annoyed by that.
I suspect it probably had something to do with it, Peter. But I suspect the overall the biggest contributant as a percentage of the whole is the PA, right? That they shared the coercive behaviour that was alleged that Christian Horner was made by a PA that Christian. That person was PA to Christian and Adrian Newey, and I don't think Adrian Newey liked that, apparently, allegedly.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. What I do know is that from what I've read of that situation, which isn't very much, it seems to be about the same as every other Formula One team I've ever known over the years. Won't go into any more detail than that, but Adrian's been around the block a few times in terms of knowing how Formula One works, and nothing unusual at all in any of that. But anyway, I think I'm right. I think that's where it started.
Wow.
Given, you got to look at the history of it. Adrian really likes Fernando, loves working with him. Fernando was available, and Red Bull didn't even pick up the phone to him. Just look at those two facts, and that probably tells us a lot.
Yeah.
And even if he didn't know Fernando that well at that point, his brain would have said, I'm going to design the best car in Formula One for them. I want the best two drivers I can have. Isn't that what his brain would have said?
Yeah, agreed.
And Christian probably was thinking, I've got to have whatever, Seb's got to be number one, or Max has got to be number one. He's probably doing the right thing in terms of those drivers and winning the drivers' championship. But engineers don't always think the same way. And I remember that was the case with Patrick Head at Williams, because in '79, it was a very well-balanced team between Alan Jones and Clay Regazzoni. Clay actually won Williams' first Grand Prix, '79 British Grand Prix, and he was a very good number two, in inverted commas, to Alan Jones. And yet, over the winter, Williams blew that apart and signed Carlos Reutemann because he was quicker, they thought, than Clay Regazzoni, which he was. But Patrick never really liked that decision that Frank made. He didn't go along with it. And I'm kind of going the other way now. All I'm saying is that engineers don't necessarily agree with the way the team principal is thinking.
F1. Who'd be an F1 team manager? Peter Windsor, not me dealing with all of that politics and shenanigans. It'd be too big a Rubik's cube, too complicated a Rubik's cube for me to solve. I couldn't imagine. It's
yeah, and I think that's why you find so many teams in a tangle, because they do spend so much time with all the politics. And if you look at Ferrari now, you've mentioned John Alcon, but I mean, if you talk to the average Formula One fan, I mean, who's John Alcon? What's he got to do with the team? You see what I mean? It all becomes absurdly complicated. If you keep things simple in the Morris Nunn Ensign one car team sense of the word, there's no magic in Formula One, it's just logic, which is what Morris used to say, then it does work. It does work. And it's only when you have too many factions, too many committees, and too much politics, and not enough control by one person, that it becomes a mess. And hats off to Zach Brown, because he is that guy at McLaren, and he has got that ability and that vision to keep everything under control in every department and not let it become burdened with what you've just described, with politics and all the other stuff that comes with bureaucracy and middle management. He's kept it very lean and mean. He's got very good managers of groups that listen to people and more importantly, listen to him. And he lets them then get on with it. And he doesn't prevent people being promoted or having more freedom because he's worried about losing his position of strength. He's happy to let people have their head. And that's what doesn't happen, in my opinion, at Ferrari. I think too many people are worried about losing their position at Ferrari, and there's too much subjugation of good people into towing the line because everybody's worried about their job.
Oof.
And you can't have that. And I don't know whether Christian is that type of manager or not. I really don't know.
Apparently, towards the end, it was. Towards the end, it was more. I mean, one of the reasons that apparently has been put forth why they got rid of him is because it was becoming Christian Horner racing as opposed to Red Bull racing, that he was making too many decisions in his own self-serving image rather than what's best for the team, apparently. No, I don't know.
I mean, I suspect probably there's something going on behind the scenes with his legal situation that may have made life difficult going forward. I don't know. I mean, it's only my guess, but yeah, maybe they should have called it Arden Formula One again. Well, not Formula again, Arden, just because they've never been in Formula One, have they? But then, that's what it is, isn't it? It is a race team like Arden, ultimately. And that's why Red Bull's always been successful, because it's a relatively small, clean, linear operation without all politics of Ferrari.
Yeah.
Just let them get on with it.
Yeah. That was the Red Bull Racing gift for a long time until it wasn't, Peter. And it feels like he divided the team, that you had your Christian Horner loyalists that would go to bat for him in any circumstance, but you had the guys and girls, the employees on the opposite side of the fence, who thought that Christian Horner's time at Oracle Red Bull Racing was long, but his best years at least were now long behind him. Mr. Windsor, let me ask you a final question.
Let me come back on that.
Of course.
Has that only happened, do you think, since we lost poor Dietrich Mateschitz?
It's too. I think when Dietrich passed, there was a black hole of power into which Oliver Mintzlaff, Mark Mateschitz, Dietrich's son, and Christian Horner all tried to fit. Because Dietrich was a proper Caesar at the gate, right? He would ultimately make the decisions. He signed all the checks and rubber stamped everything, especially the big remuneration package decisions. They all rested. It's a limited company still, so they all rested with Dietrich. When Dietrich passed, who's the ultimate Caesar at the gate now? Is it Christian because he's Red Bull Racing? Is he Oliver Mintzlaff because he's Austria Salzburg Red Bull GmbH? So there was a lot of fighting and politicking to determine who was ultimately the who had the power of veto as far as the decisions, and ultimately that's paid to Christian.
Surely the way of the world should be Oliver and Mark saying, what would Dietrich want here? What would they want? Would they want Christian to go? Would they want him to stay? Would they support him? Wouldn't they be trying to do what Dietrich wanted to do, bearing in mind the whole thing was Dietrich's concept in the first place, rather than going in their own personal directions?
And I think that's what, for example, Porsche is a brilliant case in point, right? Because Dietrich really wanted, prior to his passing, for Red Bull to do a collaboration with Porsche, and Christian, as soon as Dietrich passed, was like, see you later, Porsche. We'll have a word with Ford. And Mark and Oliver would have been looking at like and Kircher would have been like, hang on, what is this? Is this Red Bull Racing or is this Christian Horner Racing? So I don't know, Peter. Very complicated.
Yeah, I hear what you say about that. I'm not sure that's the case. I think there was a bit of naivety on everybody's side there in thinking that Porsche would want to do an engine for Red Bull in Formula One. Of course, Porsche would love to do an engine for Red Bull in Formula One, but the history shows that Porsche will never do that unless somebody pays them to do that.
Yeah, correct.
And I don't think anybody on the other side of the fence realized that. I think they always felt that, well, if we get them all excited, we'll meet them halfway or whatever, or we'll meet them 2/3, Porsche will do the other bit. And Porsche are very clear. no way are we going to do another engine for Formula One unless it's all paid for 100% by a third party or a second party.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that failed. And I'm surprised they even went down the path to talk to Porsche in the first place, because we all know that's how Porsche work.
Yeah.
Why do you think Ron Dennis had to get Mansell to pay for the Formula One engine all those years ago in '83? I was at the tag Porsche. Porsche weren't going to build it unless somebody paid for it. Mansell.
There is financial resources that need to be taken care of. Final one from me, Mr. Windsor. Been too generous with your time. As always, predictions, the Hungaroring this weekend coming. To save a dime puppy, who have you got?
I mean, how can you not bet on a McLaren driver around the Hungaroring? They're going to be mega quick there, aren't they?
Yeah.
And is it going to be Lando, who says it's his favourite circuit and he loves it? He's always good there. Or is it going to be Oscar, who just quietly goes in and blows him away? I don't know. By the law of averages, you'd have to say Lando probably will win this one. Although, I don't know what the law of averages mean these days. I can't see any other team beating McLaren. I suppose that's about as far as one could stick one's neck out in Hungary. The only thing about Hungary is that if you don't qualify well, you're in trouble. It's a bit like Monaco, and you've got to be very organized with traffic. Traffic's a nightmare in Hungary. But around that long right-hander, the horseshoe right-hander leading onto the pit straight, McLaren are going to be unbelievably good through there. That's going to set them up for the straight. They don't need to run anything more than maximum downforce anyway. I can't see anywhere where they'll be slow, and they'll have better tyre deg because they've got more grip. And so, Bob's your uncle.
Blimey.
It'd be an interesting race between Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, and a couple of the others maybe around Hungary, depending on the variables of qualifying and who gets bought traffic-wise, etc. But, again, difficult to see how Max is going to be quicker than a Charles around there. He might be near him, but Ferrari should be pretty good, I would have thought. And Mercedes, they'll be good too.
Oof. I'm going a resurgent Oscar Piastri, and it will be.
It'd be anyone who said no, Oscar's not going to win Hungary would be, not watching, not paying attention at the moment. It'd
be a seminal moment though, Peter, given that Lando's meant to be, as he is around Austria, meant to be a bit of a specialist around Hungary. If Oscar can beat him there, it's a very different. It means something different. It's of a moment of import, as versus Spa Eau Rouge, Eau Rouge Radillon, which is Oscar's favourite track. If he beats Lando around Hungary, an away game per se, then that could be it for Lando's championship. Mr. Windsor, you've been a legend as per you.
I think no,
absolutely
right. I mean, it's more of a negative effect on Lando. It's difficult to imagine where Lando is actually going to be quicker than Oscar around Hungary. He's no way he's going to be quicker through that last corner. Neither of them are going to be as short as Charles or Max there. And both of them will be good through there because it's a great car. Then there's that, was it turn 4, the kink, the left kink? That'd probably be flat for McLaren, I would imagine. Very near flat, both be similar there. And then the only other decent corner is that towards the end of the lap, that right-hander as they start to go down the hill on the long straight. How's Lando going to be quicker than Oscar there? He loves Hungary and he loves probably the rhythm of Hungary, but then Oscar isn't going to be rhythmic in Hungary. Yeah, of course he is. I think, it's difficult to see how that's going to pan out for Lando in terms of having an advantage over Oscar in the way Oscar did. I mean, he was flat into Pouin in qualifying, and Lando wasn't.
Wow. He's braver through the quick stuff, says Zach Brown. And that might ought to be.
But I think that's a misnomer. It's nothing to do with bravery. It's to do with feel. It's feel and touch and just feeling the right rear of the car as you're going into Pouin. Lando's not quite as much of a rear end driver as Oscar, and but beyond that, he didn't have quite the touch. I don't think it's bravery there. I always think it's a misleading path on which to go when you're describing one driver as braver than another, or this is all about bravery, because it always brings me back to the Sterling Moss thing, that if you need bravery to get in a racing car, you shouldn't be a racing driver. It's all about anticipation, feel, and touch the surface of the road through your body. That's what it's all about.
And a not bombshell, Mr. Windsor. You've been a legend as per usual. If you're not subscribed to the Peter D. Windsor YouTube channel, then genuinely, what are you doing with your life? Really? I mean that honestly, non-rhetorical question. Go and subscribe now. And if you enjoy ingesting your content through your favourite podcasting platform, the Short Corners podcast, 5-star and a follow, mandatory as per usual. If you're watching on the YouTubes, be sure to drop a like, a comment and share. If you like the video, then like the video. If you're listening on your favourite podcasting platform, again, 5 stars and a follow. Mr. Windsor, you're a legend as per usual. Purple sector F1 analysis. If there's a go-to F1 mind to have ever go-to, then I know not of him or her. Peter, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much, sir. You guys have been legends as well. Between now and next time, as always, remember to look, but never stare.